How old were you when you st- when you came into powerlifting and then started breaking those like all-time world records?
You know, I started lifting heavy right from the get-go because I thought that my 1 rep max would make me bigger. I always said that you know, lifting heavy weights doesn't necessarily make you bigger, but there's some nuance to that. The 1 to 3 rep stuff doesn't really add to hypertrophy. But I always thought the stronger I got, the bigger I would get.
Which can be true because you can handle more weight for more, the weights get easier, the submaximal weights get easier for bodybuilding, but you don't need to push it that far.
Remember, we would go in and we'd max out.
Yeah. And that's
every Monday was max. You know, you go and you'd work up to a 1 rep max.
Yeah.
And then you'd probably do a little bit of volume. But it took me a long time because remember, I was 135 pounds. I couldn't bench 135. I still remember vividly because of you know, when you're...
And you end up benching 606 in competition, I think.
Yeah, right? When you're a college kid and you're in there with a bunch of fraternity guys and 135's on the bar, and for most of them it's a warm-up.
Yeah.
And I got in and got crushed under it. And I had to take the 45's off and put the 35's on. And that was me as a freshman in college when I was 17 years old at 135 pounds. And so I remember where it started. And you just... It's one of those things where you just keep, it's addicting.
Yeah.
5 more pounds, 5 more pounds, 10 more pounds. I want to get this. And every time you hit a new PR, you set a new goal, and it just kept going like that. So it started, I was always focused on strength from the very beginning, but it was a good 6 or 7 years before I had gotten enough strength to where I could compete in a powerlifting competition. So it took quite a while.
And then you did it, I think you did what, a deadlift competition? Is that when you did 825 in Washington?
Yeah, well, that was 782 was the deadlift competition in 1993, I want to say. It's been a long time. And so that was 7 years after I started lifting, before I was strong enough to where I felt like I could enter a competition. We were lifting pretty heavy in the gym by then, but I never really thought about powerlifting as something that was a goal.
Pretty awesome. A 782 deadlift, and he's like, I think I'm good enough to go into a meet. That's because that's a very good deadlift. How old were you when you came to me? When you started breaking the all-time world records and stuff?
I was 40 because I won my pro card at the Over 40 Masters Nationals in what I think was about August of that year, 2009, with Flex Wheeler. And I flew straight from Pittsburgh back to San Jose, picked up my stuff because I'd been staying in an extended stay there, training with Flex, and then drove right over to SAC and moved into an extended stay in SAC. And we had 7 weeks to prepare for a powerlifting competition because it had to be before the world's strongest pro bodybuilder that the Olympia was putting on.
Right.
And we wanted to make sure that we had some numbers on record.
Right.
So we prepped for 7 weeks for that. When I think about it, and from the starting point of being, you know, whatever it was, 5-6% body fat on stage competing as a bodybuilder, and we were kind of behind the gun as far as, you know, we weren't even in the normal off season, and of course, as the story goes, I put on like 35 pounds over the course of the next 7 weeks. And I think the first workout that we did together, I put on 405 and I struggled with it. It was heavy. I was pretty lean. The joints were pretty sore from being that lean and having dried out. And
I remember your elbows were bothering you a lot.
Elbows were bothering me a lot. And
we were doing like banded bench and stuff. You were like, oh man, this hurts a lot.
Well, that's when you first introduced the slingshot that you had sewn yourself at home and brought it in, and I was able to actually perform bench press without pain. And then you took me off of the low bar squat and went to the SSB bar, which is still the same advice I give people now, powerlifters or otherwise, who are having wrist or elbow pain or shoulder pain, is get out from underneath that bar. Even if you're a competitor, I moved my arms out. You know, you had me move my hands out, which helped, but we used a lot of SSB. So I could get the same stimulus.
And the cambered bar.
And the cambered bar. And then we used the slingshot and we did some floor presses, which also helped with feeling the load, but without having that compression down here. And so I had done a meet earlier that year, as you recall. That was where you first had seen me. It was in Sacramento at a different gym, a different federation. And if you watch the video of that meet, you could just do, I think, Stan Efferding 2070 was my total. And that was in like February, I think, of 2009. But if you watch that meet and I bench press and rack it, I sit up and I'm going like this. I'm holding onto my elbows because they hurt so bad. And the squat was a low bar like this.
Right.
You had me bring it up a little bit higher and you had me bring my hands out. So although I had to balance the bar a little better, I didn't have all the soreness. And so that was a 550 bench in February. It was a 765 squat with the low bar position. And then when I worked with you, you made those changes. I just told this story recently again. I talked about it with Vigorous Steve. I talked about it with Derek from More Plates, More Dates. And more recently, I just talked about it again. I was talking about my strength in the early 90s as compared to my strength in 2009, 2010. And I said the most significant difference between those two times was the changes that you made with my form and my training. A lot of people wanted to claim that the difference is that I was using more performance-enhancing drugs during that time, and I most certainly was. But I made the comparator that I didn't deadlift much more.
Right.
I deadlift 782 on 2 cc's of Sustanon a week, and I deadlifted. I think I did 799 at your first meet or something like that, and then an 804 within 20 pounds on 3 grams of testosterone.
Yeah.
So, or thereabouts, or total performance-enhancing drugs. So I was, the point of the conversation was that people pull that lever hardest when there's all these other things that matter. And people will attribute, and Ronnie Coleman said the same thing. He said he got a lot bigger, but didn't get much stronger when he started increasing his dosages. And it's just to help younger athletes know that they're going to get very little additional benefit from continuing to drive those doses up and up and up, but they're going to get a whole lot of side effects and potentially, the metabolic syndrome and blood pressure and all the things that we struggled with over the years. But the point of the conversation wasn't using versus not using, or more versus less. The point of the conversation is that at some point it's enough, and you're probably not going to get significantly more benefit. You get diminishing returns, but you'll get a whole bunch of adverse effects. But people freak out on the internet every time they hear a 60-second clip.
I remember when you were asking me, you're like, okay, what do I need to take? Like, as if you were like going to write it down. You were like really ready to like learn. What am I going to take for strength? I was like testosterone and DECA, and then when the meet gets closer, you'll take some D-ball.
That's exactly what we do.
You're like, oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, it's exactly what
You're like,
do.
that's a little less complicated than bodybuilding.
Yeah. So I obviously, some things changed in terms of the performance-enhancing drug use. It's just in terms of quantity, but there wasn't any special magic, like you said.
Right.
It was just, and I said that years before in a video. I had said that a big bodybuilder that I went to in the early 90s had told me, look, if you're not going to grow on test and D-ball, you're probably not going to grow.
Right.
It doesn't need to be any fancier than that. But the point of the conversation is that, some of these younger guys just think that that's the only lever to pull. It's just, I'm just going to use more stuff. Sure, to a point, but there's a whole lot of other things that matter. And we focused a lot on nutrition, sleep, obviously the technique changes.
When you came to me from Flex Wheeler, you came to me like in incredible shape, like incredible condition.
Yeah.
Because you were doing 10 sets of 10, like twice a day or some.
It was more than we needed to do. Flex had us doing 4 exercises, 4 sets of each. So we do 16 sets per body part. We would do chest in the morning and shoulders and tries at night, and then we would do quads in the morning and hamstrings at night. 16 sets, 4 sets of 4 different exercises, which I think today is way more volume than we needed. And that's nothing you could recover from in the absence of performance-enhancing drugs. There's just no way. And it's unnecessary. It's part of what we should go over today when we're training. I wanted to talk about a lot of what I do now and a lot of what my clients do now, particularly those who have aged or who have other priorities in life, family and work and all the other stuff. The kinds of programs that I design for them, they still want to get bigger and they still want to get stronger. I have a 71-year-old guy who wants to put on 10 pounds of muscle.
Shit.
And he's been lifting for 40 years. I'm like, that's a tall ask, But then I started looking at his program, and he did a lot of the stuff that we used to do back in the 90s. A lot of volume, a lot of junk volume, probably too much frequency, or probably too much volume, but not enough frequency. But we can go over some of that today on the programs I design.
What's important when someone's a little older?
The biggest thing is fatigue, recovering from the workout, because you don't grow in the gym, right?
Right, yeah.
We always used to think you built muscle lifting weights, but you don't grow in the gym. You just, hate to even say break muscle down, you just create the stimulus because you don't grow from muscle damage either, breaking muscle down. So it's just a stimulus. And so I design in more growth days. To me, the off days are growth days. And this guy was training 6 straight. He was doing push-pull legs, push-pull legs. Like, when are you growing? I see a lot of muscle tissue breakdown. He wasn't even doing, he was training 6 days a week, but he was doing the bro splits.
And you told me that a bunch of times when you looked at my blood work, you're like, you're overtrained. Then you look at my blood work again and you say you're overtrained. You look at my blood work again, you'd be like, oh, you're finally getting a little better.
Yeah, a lot of it is.
Yeah.
A lot of the hormones are affected by overtraining. The testosterone
and I didn't feel like I was overtraining. That's a key thing for people to probably realize, is that you might not necessarily feel it, but it's going to show up probably like in your hormones and your blood.
Yeah.
Maybe lack of sleep. I know for myself, if I train really hard, I'm not going to sleep.
Right.
If I train really, really hard, if I
or the
run
quality
really hard,
sleep can be compromised. You'll have some
too sore and too banged up, and
but you still manage to come in and train again. I misspoke, because the 71-year-old guy, and this is, I'm speaking about him specifically, but it's reflective, generally speaking, about the kinds of programs that people implement as they age that aren't terribly effective. And the one is what's referred to in the industry as the bro split, where you train every body part once a week, chest every Monday, legs every, But he was training 6 days a week, but only doing one body part each day. So he was only repeating his chest workout once a week. I don't ever remember a bro split being what was utilized by the bros. When I was coming up in the early 90s, I used to travel down to Gold's Venice, and I would visit and hopefully talk to and ask questions of the people that were down there training at the time. All of them trained every body part twice a week. Most of them trained on splits. They generally did a 3 on 1 off, but a lot of them would just do a 6 on 1 off. Push-pull legs, push-pull legs. And I just mentioned, I don't think that's optimal, but they were training more, not less, in terms of frequency. And so one of the important things to understand about the optimal stimulus is that when you get in the gym and you do a workout, and you'd say for chest, you only experience hypertrophy for about 48 to 72 hours. After that time, you have atrophy. Now, the rate of that is kind of dependent on the sufficiency of the stimulus, but also it can be based on hormonal status. People on testosterone will have less decline or less atrophy over the course of the week. But so you want to get another stimulus 72 hours later. So probably the most important thing after compliance, I would say compliance is a science, after consistency, because you can't just train every now and then, once a week, every week, I'm on, off. After consistency, probably the most important thing is the frequency. You should train every body part twice a week. And then behind that is probably going to be effort. How close to failure are you getting? Are you lifting hard enough so that you're recruiting? You're doing maximal muscle fiber recruitment so you can create a stimulus. If you do 10 reps and you could have done 20, junk volume, not a sufficient stimulus, you're not going to grow from that. So after consistency and frequency, twice a week, maybe as many as 3 times a week, we can talk about that.
It seems like you don't need much if you're just trying to maintain. When
right.
You get to be like our age and you're not necessarily, like I don't think you and I are thinking that we're going to grow any further, although maybe we could push it and try to figure out a way to do it. But
yeah, this gentleman in particular, and a lot of people that come to me, whether they're competitors or not, still want to gain.
Right.
You can maintain on probably 1 workout a week doing 2 sets per body part. You can maintain, there's no question. And that's the kind of workouts that some people who, maybe they're at the level of fitness that they want to be, and it's just a distraction for them in terms of time and ability. That's fine. Most people who go to the gym, they still want to feel as though they're getting something out of it. They still want to make gains either in strength or size. And so the twice a week becomes really important. Significantly better than once a week. And then if you go to 3 times a week, maybe just a little additional benefit if you can manage fatigue. So we've got consistency, we've got frequency, we've got effort. And effort's just how close to, within a rep or 2 of failure is really all that is. Does the bar tempo slow down at the end?
Do we need all the agonizing faces and stuff that you see?
Kind of. That's kind of how I
know.
know.
Little yell, little noise.
That's kind of how I know whether you yell or not. although we do have some significant amount of research that shows that yelling or getting angry or
Stan's
swearing or
king of yelling,
we do get an improvement in performance as a result.
Those
are little things. Those are little things. And we talked today about the optimal warm-up to improve performance as well. So there are certain things that you can employ to get one more rep, which at the end of the day, like even when we're talking about creatine, you know, I don't think it's magic. I've talked before about how it's you know, a little better than nothing. But if it gives you one more rep, it's the compounding nature of that over time, the cumulative effect of that one more rep.
And yeah, but we've never been like, oh my God, I think that dude's on creatine.
No, that'll never happen. But the point being is that the effectiveness, the stimulus of the workout is the primary driver. Because if you go in and just do what you've always done before, you're not going to get any gains. And a lot of people don't realize that. I was in Cincinnati with Matt Whittemer at Beat Training just last week. And I would watch a bunch of the people in their training, particularly the women, and it's not to knock on women in general, because they generally are more disciplined and work harder than men if they're under proper coaching. You look at Brett Contreras' guys, glute guy, or girls, the glute guy, they kick ass. They train hard and they're strong, and they develop that over the course of many months or years of training. But I'll see a lot of them crossing T's and dotting I's, doing a 5-pound thing like this for a set of 10 and setting it down. Nowhere close to failure. No, not even anywhere near a hard rep. Not a sufficient stimulus. And that's kind of hard, especially as people get to be my age or older and maybe they don't have a competitive background. It's kind of hard for them to understand that that's the level of effort that they need to invest. Now, I didn't say that the weight had to be heavy. If it's hypertrophy, they can lift a heavy weight for 5 reps and get the same benefit as lifting a lighter weight for 20 reps, so long as the effort is the same, so long as they get to within a rep of failure. Whether it's the 20th rep of a lighter weight, it has to look like
it's not really that much different than strength training, although strength training, you might want to cut it a rep or two shorter than that, just because you want like you're going for more like a technical limit. So if you're doing an exercise, if you're bench pressing, you don't want your hips to shoot up if you're trying to you know, gain strength for powerlifting.
Yeah, and this is where this kind of gets even a little more specific with, like you said, for strength training. Strength is specific. So I said 5 reps, you know, a heavy 5-rep set is just as effective as a light 20-rep set for hypertrophy. But when you're talking about strength, that's specific. And you have to have loads that are, I would suggest, north of 80%, maybe north of 85% for a lot of your training in order for you to benefit from the strength benefit. And then the second thing you want to manage is fatigue. And here's what we know now that I didn't always realize, and probably what we didn't realize with strength either, that you can leave more reps in the tank. With fatigue, that 20-rep set I just described is more fatiguing than the 6-rep set with 80% of your 1-rep max. And you wouldn't think that because the weight's lighter. It's probably half the load. But it turns out it's actually more fatiguing, because fatigue is a combination of a number of things, and we're still fuzzy on what actually causes DOMs.
Buildup of waste and stuff
like that.
There's some energy system.
There's metabolites, central nervous system. Of course, there's the eccentric loading component where you do get some damage to the muscle fiber.
I guess if you did 20 reps really light, then maybe not. But if you did
anything
20 reps
within a rep or two of failure, is going to have the metabolite accumulation.
Makes sense.
Yep. And some of that's calcium ion, some of that's hydrogen ion.
A lot more eccentric work is thrown in there.
Eccentric work, and the eccentric work is what leads to muscle damage. What we know that the muscle damage isn't what drives hypertrophy now. We used to think that 10 years ago. It's just mechanical tension. It's not metabolic stress, the pump, and it's not muscle damage. Because we and I, well, I say we, you'd be fine. If you went out and jogged 5 miles, you probably wouldn't be sore tomorrow. But if I went out and jogged 5 miles, I'd be hella sore tomorrow. But I wouldn't have done anything to stimulate hypertrophy or strength from that bout. So it's not a marker. Or I say it's a marker, not a maker. It's a passenger, not a driver of hypertrophy and strength, the muscle damage. So now, in knowing that you want to minimize fatigue because your hypertrophy stimulus is only going to last for a few days, right? But DOMs can last for a week. And that you're not building muscle, you're repairing damage. Or trying to clear metabolites is what some of the supposition is. But that doesn't mean you're building muscle. All you're doing is filling the hole in that you dug. You're not actually experiencing.
Would you maybe agree that like maybe no matter what you're doing, you're trying to figure out ways to like manage fatigue within a reasonable way,
100%.
right? Whether you're bodybuilding or powerlifting. Seems like bodybuilding, you want to chase after fatigue a little bit. Like you and I might go back and forth, and we might have a minute rest in between the set. But we don't want so much fatigue that we can't do the set. We don't want so much fatigue that the 40-pound dumbbells then turn into 30s. Not to say that that workout would be worthless, but it might be invasive towards what we're trying to do.
Yeah, what you just described, the 1 minute rests, will increase fatigue, but be less effective in terms of the hypertrophy stimulus. Because as mentioned, metabolic stress is not a driver of hypertrophy. And the 1 minute rests would probably give you more metabolic stress, more
maybe
pump,
more like 2 minutes
more
rest
blood
again.
flow. So now we do have research that suggests that 2 minutes rest is better than 1 minute rest.
So the old guy at your gym that's just sitting there with his giant bag, and he's got the chalk and the baby powder, and he just talks to people all the time. That guy that guy's got it right.
He's got it right. He really does. Coupling all this together. So what you just talked about was rest periods, and then there's tempo. There's a whole list of things that we're trying to go down here to optimize for the best outcome. 2 minute rest is better than 1, sometimes 3 minutes on leg exercises, or 4. Dorian used to say that it would take him 3 or 4 minutes to remember his name after a hard set of hack squats. And so the rest periods are important. And I guess the biggest thing is that since the mechanical tension is the primary driver of hypertrophy, and with shortened rest periods, a whole lot of other things happen. Did your central nervous system recover in 1 minute? Probably not. Does your creatine phosphate stores recover in 1 minute? Probably not. Did you clear the hydrogen ion or lactate, clearance? Did that occur in 1 minute? Probably not. So if we went out and we banged out a hard set of 20 dips, rested 30 seconds, the next set would probably be 12.
Right.
So you're better off taking a longer rest so that each subsequent set has somewhere near the same repetitions as the first set. It's going to be a decline, but not a precipitous decline. So the goal is to do as many reps with that same weight as possible.
And then maybe at some other point, maybe over the course of a few weeks, maybe you are trying to shorten that time a little bit so you can be
possibly, but
fit
it's not
to have that as another stimulus.
Being fit is different than a hypertrophy stimulus.
Got it.
So now we want to separate what's your goal with weightlifting, and if you're an athlete, that's a completely different stimulus. I try not to combine. This always happens with the UFC fighters
doing burpees in between doing dips.
Yeah, they want to work real fast. They want to do a lot of drop sets. They want to take 30-second rests, and so it's really hard. Sometimes you can speed up the workout by doing antagonistic, what we call synergistic workouts. You do a bench, rest a minute, do a chin up, rest a minute, do a bench, so that now you've got 2 or 3 minutes between each bench. Although if it's heavy enough, your central nervous system is still the common denominator that's being affected by both exercises. But we have seen some research now showing you get pretty equivalent outcomes supersetting antagonistic body parts, resting between them, and you can shorten the workout because, as mentioned, some of these people that being in the gym for 2 hours isn't an option. They've got families and careers and what have you. And the more you can design a program that they can adhere to is, again, compliance is the science. And if they can't go to the gym because they don't have an hour and a half, then likelihood is they'll go skip the workout, and now you're affecting your frequency. And so all of these things kind of play into what's the best split. Everybody wants to know what's the best split. What's the one you can adhere to on the schedule that you can consistently go in. We could talk briefly about the 2 splits that I kind of recommend now, especially for busy professionals or even for people who really want to get big. It's either a full body twice a week or 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Thursday. Or it's an upper lower, day off, upper lower. So you're training every body part twice a week, and maybe the weekend off. You can extend that into an 8-day window or a 6-day window, training everything in 8 days or 6 days, making some slight variations. 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off. Will give you a 6-day repeat. 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 2 off is a 7-day repeat. Or you could do upper day off, lower day off, upper day off, lower day off. That's an 8-day repeat. So somewhere in there's some flexibility. Although I would keep trying to pinch it down as long as your fatigue isn't too high and you can recover. And how do you know if your fatigue is too high? You're not progressing. that kind of gets us to the next piece of the puzzle in terms of the hierarchy of importance for things that you need to consider. Compliance or consistency, frequency, effort. We talked a little about load. We talked about rest periods.
Getting close to failure, yeah.
Getting close to failure. And then...
when it comes to, you were talking about doing full body. I think what I've noticed, I don't really particularly set out to do anything because I don't really ever follow a program. I just kind of lift.
Yeah.
And I make the gym my playground because I think once you know the rules, then you can kind of start to break them a little bit.
Agreed.
But like I might do like lateral raises and then do some lunges, and then I might do like a belt squat, and I might do like a chin up, and then just kind of repeat and go through that cycle, multiple times. And it may or may not make sense. If I was to show it to you, it'd be like, I don't know how much sense this makes, but it's something that I enjoy. It's something that's fun. But the other thing I get from it by doing full body is I don't get that sore. Yeah. So something might be kind of sore. Might be like, oh man, my chest is a little tight. My legs might be a little sore, but not the soreness that you get when you do legs day and you do set after set after set, and your legs just feel like they're bleeding during the workout, and then you can't get up your stairs.
Let's touch on a few things that you just said there. One was, it was fun. You do the work, you do what you want to do when you want to do it, and it's fun. That's the number one most important thing. That goes into the compliance category.
Right.
If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it. What's the best exercise the one to do? So I'll go into the gym, and it's kind of an auto-regulation. If I get on a particular piece of exercise or something, and all of a sudden I'll get off. I'll go pick a different exercise. So that's for the compliance piece. The next thing you talked about, or that we were just talking about, is the progression component as being a really important part of determining whether or not you're gaining muscle. You cannot get bigger without getting stronger. It's impossible. You can get stronger without getting bigger, but you cannot get bigger without getting stronger. That's what mechanical tension and progressive overload is about. So that is important when you're measuring your progress, that you're able to get stronger. Either one more rep or 5 more pounds, maybe not every workout, but over time. You have some workouts are better than the others. Some are affected by poor sleep or stress or nutrition or whatever. But generally speaking, over time, you should be able to progress. Using the same exercise under the same conditions is a way to most accurately measure that. Now, if we're bouncing around on exercises, a little harder, but as experienced as we are, we don't have a deficit from what's called neural adaptation, learning a new movement.
Right.
Whereas a lot of beginners and intermediates, when they switch to a different movement, it might take them a week or two, or just to learn the movement, so that the coordination of executing that movement isn't the primary driver of the strength adaptation. And once you get through that neural adaptation, that coordination of learning the movement, now you're into, can I progress this by adding 1 rep or 5 pounds? I usually start in the 5 or 6 rep range on an exercise. I know people, as they get to be my age or older, are like, oh, I can't lift that heavy, I'll get hurt. If you slow the weight down and you don't bounce out of the hole, you'll find, and you warm up correctly, you'll find that those heavier loads are still manageable without causing pain. Or if you find exercises that really isolate that muscle instead of the multi-joint movements, then you can use heavier loads because there's less factors involved. Like a squat, a heavy 6-rep squat, probably something that would hurt most guys my age or older. But a heavy 6-rep leg extension, if properly warmed up, can give you a fantastic stimulus, give you both the benefits without the downside of the injury potential.
And not your back being all tight and not feeling great the next day too.
Yeah. And you said one other thing that was important, that if you do that leg workout and you're all sore and all of that, a lot of that has to do with volume. Now we're finally onto the volume discussion about and how that contributes to fatigue. You don't have to do a ton of sets to get a sufficient stimulus to grow. Matter of fact, 2 sets, as Dorian did throughout much of his career, he would do 2 top sets on a particular exercise. And the benefit of that is you have less fatigue. If you get X benefit from the first set of a hypertrophy workout, the second set is going to be 50% of X. Not nothing, but significantly diminishing returns each subsequent set. So there comes a point at which, I think that point is north of 5, sets for a given body part, 5 sets for chest in a chest workout, let's say. You get north of 5, you're accumulating significantly more fatigue for the stimulus that you're getting. Diminished returns, and now how long does that fatigue or DOMS last that might prevent you from doing another chest workout 72 hours later to take advantage of that hypertrophy-atrophy cycle? And so you can see where I'm headed with this. Volume is the one component, is the one key component that we can adjust to minimize fatigue to allow us to have more frequency. That's volume, something you have to build into over time, and I don't think that volume is progressive. It is a variable for progressing. Although you see some higher volume workouts give you a little bit more results, the curve is asymptotic.
High volume might be like, what, 5 sets of 10 or something like that? And
well, it might be the difference between 10 sets a week and 20 sets a week for a given body part. That would be a volume difference. And we have some research that shows even 30 sets a week gives you better results than 20, and 20 gives you better than 10. But they're minimal, and the research is confounded by a number of different variables. One, it's usually beginners. 2, one of the big problems is when they're measuring the results from these studies, they measure them within 72 hours of completion of the study, and you still have swelling and inflammation and water retention. So that's kind of confounded. And the other huge problem with this is everybody who gained size with more volume also got stronger. So what's driving the growth? Is it the strength or the volume? And that's what I'm talking about when the progression is so important. You can't get bigger without getting stronger. So that's what's really important. So I focus on, and if I designed the program, it would be either a upper-lower day off, upper-lower weekend off, or it would be full body Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or 2 or 3 times a week. But the workout itself would consist of maybe 3 sets. If you're training 3 times a week, it's maybe 3 sets for chest. 3 times a week, that's 9. 9 sets of chest once a week, every Monday, versus 3 sets of chest 3 times a week, far better results from 3 sets of chest 3 times a week than 9 sets once a week. Less fatigue, more taking advantage of that hypertrophy-atrophy stimulus window. So that's how I would design it. The big thing is that you don't need to do a whole ton of volume in order to get a sufficient stimulus, so you got to be careful with a lot of the junk volume.
Would it be like 2 to 3 sets of maybe 2 exercises?
No. 2 to 3 total sets.
Okay.
Now, if you're going to train chest just twice a week on the upper-lower split, then maybe you do 5 sets each workout. So you do 2 sets of bench, 2 sets of incline dumbbell. That could probably be enough 4 sets twice a week. Pick 2 exercises for chest. Pick 2 exercises for legs, an extension and a leg press. 2 exercises for hamstrings, a knee hinge and a hip hinge. But only 2 or 3 sets of each would be about it, about 2 sets of each. And I think that covers most of, other than tempo, there's really no sense doing a 10-second negative. All you need to do is control the weight and then do your concentric, just so it's not slamming down. But the eccentric portion of the movement creates more muscle damage, as we discussed, and that can then lead to more DOMs and less frequency. So it has an adverse effect in my mind. And you and I have walked around sore for 30 years, thinking, not only wearing it as a badge of honor for how hard we trained, but thinking that was made
necessary.
That was necessary, and that was indicative of a great workout. Whereas now we know in terms of results, it's not necessarily the case. Back to the warm-up. So how do we get ready for a workout like this? You go into the gym, you're going to do a full body workout. So I'm going to do 2 sets of chest, 2 sets of quads, 2 sets of hamstrings, 2 sets of shoulders, 2 sets of back, 2 sets of biceps, 2 sets of triceps. Still a decent amount of total sets for a workout. Warming up's important. You want to get your body temperature up. You want to get your heart rate elevated. But we have some research now that shows us what's the optimal warm-up to improve performance for the workout. And the optimal warm-up is to use progressively load the exercise you're going to be doing. So it's not necessarily to do 10 minutes of bike and stretching, and dynamic and static. Neither one showed an improvement in performance for the bout itself. If you need a little bit of that to get yourself loosened up, fine. Doesn't improve performance, doesn't decrease injury risk. But what we found is that when you work up in load on the bar to get close to your working weight, this is what you used to do with me at SuperTraining and what the literature describes as post-activation potentiation. When you lift a heavy weight, it activates your central nervous system to anticipate or expect that that's what you're going to have to be required to perform. And a lot of lifting, there's a psychological component, a central nervous system component, perceived exertion. So you want to kind of replicate that. So what you used to have me do when we warmed up for a meet or for a heavy lift is I would take, you maybe even just warm up with a band and do 5 minutes of bike or whatever, just to get your body temperature up. But then we take the exercise that we intend to perform and we would gradually work up on load on the bar. But we wouldn't want to pre-exhaust, which is historically what a lot of bodybuilders would do. I've used the analogy that some guys, when they're doing an incline dumbbell press, they'll grab the 60s and do a set of 10, then they'll rest a bit, and grab the 70s and do a set of 10, then they'll rest a bit, grab the 80s, do a set of 10, rest a bit. Now they're on to their work sets, which is the 90s or 100s, whatever. And that's the hard set that's going to get them to within a rep of failure with a significant amount of effort, and their face grimacing, and they may even want to spot, right? Which we know it's not necessary to go to total failure, but we like to see how far we can get there. Every now and then I think you should take a set to failure just to see what you're capable of. But that fourth set, the 90s or the 100s, that's one set. 60s, 70s, and 80s didn't provide a sufficient stimulus for hypertrophy and could potentially have impeded or impaired your top set. You could have lost a rep on your top set because you exhausted. Maybe you got a pump, and a pump doesn't drive hypertrophy, but it can inhibit your ability to lift a maximum load. Last thing we do in a powerlifting meet is get a pump backstage.
Right.
You don't do that. So how would we warm up? You would take me to the bench, and I would hit 135 for a double and rack it, and I would sit down for a bit, and then I would hit 135 again for a single. That second set with 135, the bar just exploded off your chest as compared to the first. Put 225 on. I just do a single, right? Sit for a minute, do 225 again. It just explodes off the chest. Your body's adapting. It's post-activation potentiation. And we keep working up like that. I would do 315 for a single, 315 again for a single. Did the same thing with squats. And I would touch a box 2 inches above parallel, so I'd never actually reach the stretch reflex position. And it was just touch and go. The second set with the same weight was always more explosive than the first set. Mm-hmm. So now you get up to you want to get to within about 80% of your 1 rep max is what's recommended. This is what the study looked at. Get about 80% of your 1 rep max and hit a single, okay? Now maybe your top set for the day is only going to be 80% of your 1 rep max, and you're going to try for reps, 5, 6, 7, 8, wherever that you're able to get. If you hit the single first at 80% of your 1 rep max, rest, then do your top set for reps, consistently saw in the literature that people would get an additional repetition. That's huge, because that's what's driving hypertrophy.
Right.
5 more pounds of the 1 more rep. So that's post-activation potentiation. That's what they describe it in the literature, but it's a warm-up that improves performance. Everybody's got their own warm-up, whether it's the, what did you invent? The little
hip circle?
The little hip circle,
Yeah.
Which, by the way, brilliant, because I can't tell you how many times I use those little rubber bands and they dig into your legs and they roll around.
And your hip was messed up there.
And my hip was totally messed up.
Yeah.
So whether you're hip circling or you're foam rolling or you're, whatever it takes you to be able to perform the exercise and get through that range of motion without pain or without, the distraction of pain, then you want to, if you need to do that. But the actual performance benefit is going to come from that post-activation potentiation. So that's how we warm up. So how now, if we've got a whole body workout for chest, back, do we re-warm up every single body part? And my suggestion is that you don't.
We go over ready to go, yeah.
We hit a light bench, go over here and hit a light back, not a lot of reps, 1 rep. And then go over there and hit a leg extension, 1 rep. And I just keep kind of circuiting through the gym, and I'm warming up my whole body. I'm warming up my central nervous system. And then the order doesn't matter to me. But I know I've got to do 2 sets for chest, 2 sets for quads, 2 sets for hammies, 2 sets for back, 2 sets for shoulders. I don't care what order that's in. And I know they have to be, for me, it's going to be a top set of 6 reps. That's going to be a heavy load. So my warm-up is going to have to require that I gradually progress all those. So I just kind of go around the gym hitting 1 set, adding load every single time. These sets don't count. I don't want to do a ton of reps. I don't want to pre-exhaust myself. I don't want to get a pump. And then when I'm finally ready or my body's ready, and some parts get ready before others. My biceps will get ready really quick, and I can go hit my top set of biceps, top 2 sets of biceps long before I ever reach my top set of leg extensions. Because leg extensions, I've got to go all the way up to, really heavy weight. But eventually, I've got 2 sets for every single body part in, and I'm doing just top sets. So that's how I warm up. That's how I do the workout. It saves me time. It gets me the most efficient stimulus. It creates less fatigue because I'm not doing too much volume. I can do it with more frequency and take the advantage of the hypertrophy-atrophy cycle. That to me is the best currently program that you could design for someone. I think a lot of that applies to most people, but certainly for those in our age group or older, I think that's the ideal program. Now I know that was rather lengthy, but there's just so many components to it.
What do you think about, is it smart to utilize some of the methods that have been utilized by like a Jay Cutler or Lee Haney or Dorian Yates? I believe all 3 of those guys, in addition to a lot of others, have utilized a pre-exhaust, which kind of sounds like it counters some of the stuff that you said, but it really doesn't. It actually more falls in line, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to use fatigue to their advantage, like get themselves to a pre-fatigue state so that they can pour everything into that one hard set. I think you did it with Flex Wheeler as well, where you did leg press, leg extension back and forth, but maybe you did too much.
Yeah, you're saying 2 things at once now. Now, first of all of those guys that you just mentioned were huge. When Jay Cutler was 18 years old, he was massive. He said he didn't really gain much weight from 18 to 35.
Right.
He was just refining his physique, and he was improving weaknesses because his legs at 18 were just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and he used to squat. He used to squat 700 pounds.
Yeah.
When he was 18. It got to and same with Dorian. It got to the point where it became injurious, and he was loading a lot of structures.
They needed to figure out a way to lift less almost.
That is where they started implementing you call it pre-exhaust, but really they were just doing a different exercise, like a leg extension, that wouldn't subject them to injury with the huge loads of squatting.
It's almost like a warm-up, but they had so much volume under their belt, it didn't necessarily impede the fact that Jay Cutler would still use 4 plates and bury all of them perfectly. Plus he had the strength to do like 700-pound squat.
They both did 2 things. And I wouldn't even necessarily call it a warm-up, because they were doing the leg extension 2 within a rep of failure. So it was an actual, workout. And then the type of squat they did change. So now, yes, they were pre-exhausted. The exercise you do first in your workout is usually going to give you the best results.
Let's pause for just a second.
Sorry.
I did, I misspoke. So what Dorian Yates was doing is Dorian Yates was going from one piece to another. What you were doing with Flex Wheeler was going from one piece to another kind of immediately. And Jay Cutler and a few others were doing and Lee Haney, they were doing leg extensions by themselves, and then they would rest normal, and then they would squat.
And then they would go squat. Yeah. And they changed their squat form. First it was for how much load they could take, and then some of them even went to Smith machines. And then it was more of a straight up and down. And that was because their knees simply couldn't handle those loads consistently anymore. And so Jay would squat at the end of a workout when he had already almost completely wiped out his legs. And it's probably more volume than is necessary and more load than is necessary for most people. And I think that a lot of what the professional bodybuilders and I was able to do in terms of maximum recoverable volume was a result of performance-enhancing drugs. And so not only was it unnecessary, but it's impossible to recover from those kinds of workouts for a natural athlete. And so I think we did a lot of things based on ego, based on our perception of what, how much hard work contributed.
And how bad it feels. Like it feels terrible when you do that.
It feels terrible. I mean, I bragged about the fact that I would get cramps in the middle of the night, and I would have to walk upstairs one step at a time, holding onto the railing. And you look back and you're like, it probably wasn't necessary, but we prided ourselves that we could, because everybody wants to say that the reason they're more successful than someone else is because they just worked harder. Mm-hmm. And in this case, you got to work smarter, and harder might even be detrimental. You see the people who take sets closer to failure or to true failure do worse than the people who left a rep in the tank. Yeah. And as we touched on with powerlifting, you want to leave at least 2 reps in the tank. You don't want to be grinding repetitions, when you're moving slowly through the concentric contraction, you're probably compromising speed, which is a big component for powerlifting. And you're creating more fatigue than you can recover, particularly with those loads. Because when we start working up to 600, 700, 800 pound deadlifts, you don't want to be grinding a deadlift. It's going to take you a week to recover from. Look at the way the Chinese train their Olympic lifters. Mm-hmm. Those guys have like 9 to 14 sessions a week, but they're submaximal.
Right.
And so that's what becomes really important. Look at Lane's frequency. Sometimes he'll deadlift 3 times a week, but he's not pulling within 2 reps of his max. Yeah, he's pulling heavy, mm-hmm. but how many reps you do there? And I guess some things to consider. A couple little quotes that just to wrap this thing up on. 2 in particular. If you lift a heavier weight slower, did you get stronger? And the answer is no. And then also something to consider about the progressive portion of getting stronger. You don't add weight to get stronger. You get stronger so you can add weight. So 2 very important quotes to just think about. Mm-hmm. Just, they don't tell you everything, but if you just think about that carefully, it might help you to kind of meter out what's giving you the best result, because the adaptation has already occurred. And so usually when you go to the gym with the auto-regulation in mind, if you work up to a weight that you used to do, it was hard at 5 reps and suddenly it's easy that day, adding the 5 pounds didn't get you the result. The previous work that you had done, the adaptation had already occurred, and now you're able to grab that extra 5 pounds. Grab it when you can. Take what your body gives you. If you go into the gym and weights are moving quicker, or if that extra rep is there and you know you're further from failure than you used to be, take that extra rep. It's there. And that really just shows you that your work is working. That didn't actually drive the adaptation. It's backwards from the way that we used to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's frustrating. If I knew then what I know now. And so, but here we are. You know, we've managed to make it work the way we did, and but now we can pass on the information that we know is probably more optimal than the way than a lot of things we forced ourselves to do.